Good.
To help us do that, we're pleased to be joined by Stanford professor William Damon, who is the director of the Stanford Center on Adolescence, author of The Path to Purpose, and his new book, A Round of Golf with My Father, The New Psychology of Exploring Your Past to Make Peace with Your Present. Professor Damon, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hello, Professor. Are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep, we
Yes.
got you now. Thank you.
Okay.
So the A Round of Golf with My Father, the genesis of that title.
Well, I found out that my father was a great golfer. Now, that should be something that everybody would know about their father, but the fact is that I knew nothing about him at all until late in my life, until I was about 60 years old, when my daughter called me and said, "Dad, I got curious about this grandfather of mine that I never met, you never met." And so I went online and did some research about him. My father never came back from World War II, and for the first part of my life, I thought that he was killed in action. He was on the front lines in Germany, and my mom never really told me much about the story. I did finally know that he was stayed alive, but I wasn't interested at that point. But when my daughter gave me a call, she uncovered lots of information about him. He was dead at the time, but he had a pretty significant life, it turned out. And one of the least exotic things on the list, I can tell you more about what his life was like in a minute, but the golf point was that what she dug up was an account from the United States Information Agency, which he worked for, and the first sentence in that was, "Phil Damon was a great golfer."
Oh. Well, wait.
Well,
Hey, look, that's how I'd like to be remembered. I'm not going to be remembered that way, but that's how I'd like to be. Sure.
Aircraft had moments.
Yeah.
So why?
Exactly.
Real quick, why didn't he come back from World War II?
Well, he abandoned us, essentially. He was in Europe. He was involved with the War Department, with Foreign Service. I think he was very young, and I think he just didn't want to take the responsibility of coming back to a wife and a young child. And that, of course, was incredibly irresponsible, and it was something that I always resented. And the golf thing was kind of symbolic of my resentment, because I love golf, but I am very far from a great golfer. And the first thing I thought when my daughter discovered this was, why didn't the guy ever come by to teach me how to play the game, even once?
Mm-hmm.
Because I grew up in, as you can imagine, with an abandoned wife. We grew up in kind of unprivileged circumstances, and I never was able to afford lessons or anything. So the reason I call the book A Round of Golf with My Father is, when I started doing research about the guy and meeting some of his relatives and so on, I came up with an old golf bag of his that had a scorecard in it, filled out with his score. So I went back to his old club. They let me play around. I played against his scorecard. I had a great time. I imagined he was there. It was kind of a bonding experience for me. And in a way, it gave me a way to respect him and to partially forgive him, which was a healing experience for me. And that is symbolic. That round of golf is symbolic to lots of other conversations I had with people, picking up his old war records. Turned out that he was courageous, he was patriotic, he served his country, and even though it didn't erase the damage he did to my mother and coming back, at least it gave me a pathway to having some admiration for him and not thinking he was just a total irresponsible scoundrel, that he had a life that had some value to his country. And he even had a second family, and I've met his two daughters. They are my half-sisters, and we have become close. So there were a lot of benefits for me to go back and find out the truth of what actually happened and fill it in with some living detail.
Who won the round of golf, you or your dad?
I have to admit he did. But I will say I played well. I
Good.
felt liberated and had a great game. but he was a very good golfer.
See, even the technology. You can imagine the clubs he played with versus the clubs you were playing with. Even the technology, he's still got to be able to swing. It's not a, it's not an equipment issue. Um,
Well, yeah, yeah.
well, so this is interesting. I mean, that's really a sort of remarkable story, but it speaks to this framework that you have that you develop in your book called the Life Review, and
Yeah.
and just explain what that is and the importance of it.
Well, as a psychologist, that was my professional interest in doing this, and I am a lifespan developmental psychologist. I had never used a life review before. That was a method developed by a legendary psychiatrist named Robert Butler, who was the first director of the National Institute of Aging and a Pulitzer Prize winner. And basically, it's a way of going back over your life, over your parents' lives, your ancestors' lives, and looking for lessons that you can learn from mistakes people have made, looking for high points, things that have been gratifying and purposeful in the past that you can bring forward, figuring out how to deal with regrets and resentments. For example, my resentment about my father never coming around to teach me golf. And when you confront things in an open way, rather than deny them and try to bury them, it never works. You can't really free yourself from your past by just ignoring it. I found it much better to open it up, confront it, admit when there were things that I regretted, and find a way to come to terms with it, and even find the positive things. There were some things about growing up without a father that gave me strengths that I wouldn't have had otherwise. There were a lot of things that I needed to understand about why I became the kind of person I am. And a lot of mysteries. I found out, unbeknownst to me, that I actually went to the same school that my father went to.
Wow.
And so I looked up our old school records, and I could see even some of the same teachers wrote things about him that then wrote about me 20 years later when I went to the same school. And that was amazingly revealing and fascinating. So the Life Review, it's not only, I think, healing and redeeming, it's also really interesting and fun to go back and meet people that influenced you or had some influence over your parents, and find out something about your family history.
It's reminiscent of the observation that William Faulkner made in Requiem for a Nun. The past is never dead; it's not even past.
Exactly, it's who we are, and we can't escape it. We shouldn't get stuck in the past. We need to bring the past forward to help ourselves understand our present and pave the way to a hopeful, confident future. But in understanding the past, it actually liberates you from the past, from the problems you had in the past. I found in my experience.
Now, did your half sisters know about your existence?
They did, and when I contacted them, they said, "Oh, we always wondered about this William. That it was their aunt, my father's sister, that told them about me. My father would never talk about me apparently until he died, but his sister, their aunt, did, and they were always curious and they were eager to meet me. And so now I grew up as an only child. Now I have two siblings, which is a wonderful thing."
All right, I'm going to put myself on the couch since we got you. I get a freebie here. I'm not going to be invoiced for
The
this.
floor is yours, Dan.
Yeah, so no, this is interesting because I have this conversation. We've had this conversation on the show a bit too with authors on this specific topic. But so I was adopted, and I don't know who my biological parents are, and I really don't have any particular interest. Some people who want to go find that out, and other people don't. And so, would you say that I'm repressing something, or that you can just actually, after some consideration, just come to the decision that my parents are the people who raised me and sacrificed for me, and I'm just content with that, and it's just not something that bothers me, and thus I don't have that inquisitive, there's nothing that's particularly compelling me like it does some people to find that history.
Yeah, well, it sounds to me that you're at peace with it, and you grew up with, like adopted kids growing up in intact families. you grew up with real parents. They
Right.
were your real parents. So it's a bit of a different. And so, if I were in your situation, I don't think I would feel driven the way I did growing up with a single mom, not knowing anything about what happened to her or me when my father left us. And I was troubled by it and filled with regrets and resentments and so on. I was not at peace. So for me, the experience of going back and finding out what really happened and confronting it and figuring out what the both downsides and upsides of it were and what difference it made for me, it was pretty important and pressing for me to do it. I think if I grew up in an intact family that loved me and took me in, I would feel that they were my real parents, and I probably would not feel that I needed to go through all that, unless you're interested in some. For
Right.
some
Yeah, you
reason.
could just do it.
Right.
Ancestry.com.
Yeah, I don't
spit
even-
in a cup and
Yeah.
find
Yeah, I
out who
don't
your
know.
parents or cousins
No, I
are.
don't like it. I don't like spitting in cups.
Okay.
Yeah. He is
He's above it.
William Damon. He's a professor at Stanford. He's the director of the Stanford Center on Adolescence, the author of The Path to Purpose, and his latest book, A Round of Golf with My Father, The New Psychology of Exploring Your Past to Make Peace with Your Present. Professor Damon, thanks for joining us. Good luck with the book and fairways and greens on the golf course.
Thanks so much. Great talking to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show